Hello and welcome to my channel. I hope you enjoy this story. I'm going to try and upload a new story each day. The Sinister Symphony. Chapter 1: The Island's Whisper. Holly Arnold, an accomplished composer known for her evocative symphonies, had always sought inspiration in the serene landscapes of the Isle of Wight. The island, with its rolling hills and mist-covered shores, held a mystic allure that never failed to spark her creativity. Holly had rented a quaint, isolated cottage overlooking the sea, where the rhythmic crashing of waves against the cliffs provided a natural symphony, a perfect backdrop for her next masterpiece. As she settled into the cozy cottage, Holly felt a strange pull, a whispering urge to explore the lesser-known parts of the island. One misty morning, armed with her notebook and a thermos of coffee, she ventured into the dense woods that bordered her temporary home. The deeper she went, the more the world seemed to fade away, leaving only the haunting calls of unseen birds and the rustling of leaves underfoot. After what felt like hours, Holly stumbled upon a dilapidated mansion hidden away from prying eyes. Its grandeur was now masked by vines and moss, windows broken and doors hanging askew. An inexplicable compulsion drew her inside. The air within was thick with dust and decay, yet there was something else in energy, a presence that seemed to beckon her forward. In the grand hall, amidst the tattered remnants of what must have once been opulent furnishings, Holly discovered an old, ornate piano. Its keys, though yellowed with age, gleamed in the dim light filtering through the broken windows. Unable to resist, she sat before it and placed her fingers on the keys. The moment she did, a chill ran down her spine. The piano seemed to respond to her touch, resonating with an eerie, otherworldly harmony. Chapter 2: The First Note. Days turned into weeks as Holly became obsessed with the piano. She would spend hours playing, losing herself in the haunting melodies that flowed effortlessly from her fingers. Each note seemed to carry the weight of centuries, whispering secrets of the past. Holly's notebook filled with new compositions, each more complex and darkly beautiful than the last. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and shadows crept into the room, Holly played a particularly haunting piece. As the final note hung in the air, she heard it a whisper, faint but unmistakable, coming from behind her. Heart-pounding, she turned to find the room empty, save for the creeping shadows. Shaking off their knees, she returned to her playing, but the whisper persisted, growing louder, more insistent. Determined to understand the source of the voice, Holly delved into the mansion's history. She learned that it once belonged to a reclusive composer, Elias Thorne, whose final symphony was said to be so powerful it drove him to madness. Local legends spoke of a pact with dark forces, and how Thorne's music could summon spirits from beyond. Holly dismissed the tales as superstition, but the more she played, the more she felt an uncanny connection to Thorne's tragic story. Chapter 3: The Dark Composition. One stormy night, Holly awoke to the sound of music echoing through the cottage. The melody was familiar, one she had composed herself, but it was twisted, filled with an ominous power that made her blood run cold. She followed the sound to the grand hall, where the piano played itself, keys moving with a ghostly precision. Transfixed, Holly watched as the music unfolded. It was then she saw them shadowy figures, barely perceptible, moving in the corners of her vision. They seemed drawn to the music, their movements in sync with the haunting melody. As the final note played, the figures vanished, leaving Holly trembling in the silent room. Determined to finish the symphony, Holly spent every waking moment at the piano. The music had a life of its own, guiding her hands, shaping the notes into a dark and beautiful masterpiece. But with each completed section, the whispers grew louder, more coherent, until Holly could make out words, pleas for release, threats of vengeance. One night, as Holly put the finishing touches on the symphony, a cold wind swept through the hall, extinguishing the candles and plunging the room into darkness. The whispers erupted into a cacophony, voices overlapping in a discordant frenzy. Holly felt a cold hand on her shoulder and turned to see the ghostly form of Elias Thorne, his eyes burning with an unholy light. Chapter 4: The Unleashed Force. "You have done well." Thorne's voice was a raspy whisper, each word dripping with malice. "But now, the symphony must be played in full, only then will the pact be complete." Holly tried to pull away, but her hands were frozen to the keys. The shadows around her thickened, taking on more defined forms, spirits of those who had been drawn to Thorn's music, now trapped in his eternal symphony. With a sense of impending doom, Holly began to play, her fingers moving of their own accord. As the music filled the hall, the spirits grew more restless, their shapes solidifying, faces twisted in anguish and rage. The air crackled with energy, and the room seemed to vibrate with the force of the music. Holly's mind screamed for her to stop, but she was powerless, a mere vessel for the dark composition. With the final, thunderous chord, the room exploded with a blinding light. Holly was thrown back, hitting the floor with a force that knocked the breath from her lungs. When she opened her eyes, the mansion was gone. She was lying in a clearing, the morning sun breaking through the trees. Chapter 5: The Aftermath. Holly returned to her cottage, her mind a whirlwind of fear and confusion. She tried to tell herself it was a dream, a hallucination brought on by exhaustion and stress. But the notebook on her desk, filled with the dark symphony, told a different story. Determined to destroy the cursed composition, Holly threw the notebook into the fireplace. The pages blackened and cold, but as the last sheet turned to ash, she heard a whisper again, faint but unmistakable. "You cannot escape us," the voice hissed. "The symphony is part of you now." Terrified, Holly fled the Isle of Wight, leaving behind her career, her passion, and the haunting memories of that night. She moved to a bustling city, hoping to lose herself in the noise and anonymity. But the music followed her. It played in her dreams, in the hum of machinery, in the whispers of the wind. No matter where she went, a symphony was there, a dark force that had become a part of her. Holly knew that as long as she lived, she would never be free of the sinister melody that had claimed her soul. And in the darkest corners of the world, the shadows whispered, waiting for the next composer to unleash their dark symphony. Chapter 6: The New Reality. Holly tried to start anew in the city, taking a mundane office job far removed from her musical past. She avoided anything related to music, fearing the dark force lurking in the shadows of each note. But the symphony, now embedded in her very essence, made its presence known in subtle, insidious ways. One night, as she lay in bed, the sound of faint music drifted through her apartment. Holly sat up, her heart pounding. The melody was unmistakable, her symphony. She followed the sound to the living room, where her old piano, covered in a sheet, stood in the corner. She had brought it with her, unable to part with it despite her fear. The sheet was drawn back, revealing the gleaming keys. Holly's hands trembled as she touched them. The piano seemed to hum with anticipation, the dark force within it yearning to be released. As she pressed a key, the room filled with the haunting melody, and the shadows around her began to stir. Chapter 7: The New Victims. Holly's life became a nightmare. The symphony played itself at odd hours, drawing the attention of her neighbors. They came, curious and captivated by the dark beauty of the music. Holly watched in horror as they were drawn into the same sinister web that had ensnared her. One by one, her neighbors began to change. They became distant, their eyes hollow and haunted. Whispers filled the apartment building, spreading through the walls like a malignant virus. Holly knew she had to do something before the symphony claimed more victims. She reached out to experts in the occult, hoping to find a way to break the curse. Her search led her to a reclusive scholar named Dr. Evelyn Blackwood, who had studied Elias Thorne's works and the dark forces behind them. Dr. Blackwood agreed to meet with Holly, intrigued by her story and the possibility of confronting the malevolent entity. Chapter 8: The Final Stand. Dr. Blackwood arrived at Holly's apartment, bringing with her ancient texts and protective talismans. Together, they devised a plan to confront the dark force and destroy the symphony once and for all. Holly was terrified but resolute. She had to end this nightmare. They waited until midnight, the hour when the veil between worlds was thinnest. Holly sat at the piano, Dr. Blackwood at her side, chanting incantations from a dusty tome. As Holly began to play, the shadows in the room thickened, and the air grew cold. The symphony's power surged, the notes vibrating with a dark, unholy energy. The spirits appeared, their forms clearer, their faces twisted with rage and sorrow. Holly felt their pain, their despair, and the malevolent presence of Elias Thorne. "Now!" Dr. Blackwood shouted, her voice barely audible over the cacophony. Holly played the final chord, and Dr. Blackwood completed her incantation. The room exploded with light and sound, the shadows writhing and screaming. Holly felt herself being pulled into the darkness, but she held on, pouring all her will into the music. The light grew brighter, blinding, and then silence. Chapter 9: The Aftermath. When Holly awoke, she was lying on the floor, Dr. Blackwood beside her. The room was silent, the piano keys still. The shadows were gone, oppressive presence lifted. Holly felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in months. "It's over," Dr. Blackwood said, helping Holly to her feet. "The symphony is destroyed, the spirits are free." Holly wept with relief, thanking Dr. Blackwood for her help. The scholar smiled, her eyes tired but triumphant. "You were stronger than you knew, Holly. The music was part of you, but you controlled it. Remember that." Chapter 10: A New Beginning. Holly decided to leave the city and return to the Isle of Wight, not out of fear, but to reclaim the place that had once inspired her. She found a new cottage, overlooking the sea, where she could start afresh. The piano was gone, but Holly felt no loss. Instead, she took up a new instrument, a simple acoustic guitar. She began to compose again, creating melodies filled with light and hope. The dark symphony was a distant memory, a shadow that no longer had power over her. As she played, the waves crashed against the cliffs, and the wind whispered through the trees. Holly knew she had faced the darkness and emerged stronger, her music now a testament to her resilience and courage. And in the quiet moments, when the world was still, Holly could hear the faintest echo of her symphony, a reminder of the darkness she had conquered and the life she had embraced. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed this story. Please don't forget to like, and even better, like and subscribe. Thank you very much, and I hope you have had or have a great day.